Hey guys, Lee here from Seek One, here with it's hard to label which ones are my favorite, but I'm gonna just say three of my favorite deer. Some of them you've probably seen before, some of them you probably haven't. There's actually a cool story to go with all three of these, but I'm gonna dive into maybe some of the details that you don't know and telling the stories of 3.5 deer. All right, where to begin? Let's start with the ones that we do know, and I'll end with the one that we don't know. So these two deer were filmed, you can find these videos on our channel. This one you can't. This was a before Seek One was a thing video, no footage of that deer, but an amazing story to go with it. And I guess we'll start off with Charlie. So Charlie is really the deer that started everything for us at Seek One. I think when we were hunting this deer, we didn't have a name. Seek One wasn't a name at the time. We were just kind of filming for fun. Drew had a tough year the year before this guy. He was hunting a big, giant 200-inch deer. And I think he put in like 60-something sits that season and just got just demoralized from maybe burnout. I don't know what word he would use, but he had a rough season going all in on a big 200-inch deer. And we were kind of getting interested in the filming stuff. We were really just having amazing whitetail stories happen to us in a very unique place. And it was like, man, it'd be really cool to document some of this. And so Drew picked up a camera and basically committed his whole season to filming the story of Charlie. Now, at the time, I'd hunted this deer when I killed him, this was the third year that I was hunting him. First year I hunted him, he was just a typical giant, perfectly symmetrical 10-pointer. Always had these just characteristically super tall brow tines, and that's kind of how I got him. The name Charlie was Charlie Brown, Charlie Brow. And so anyways, that's kind of how the name happened, and it stuck. He just always had these crazy brow tines. And so the first year, he was a clean, typical 10, probably, around the mid-170s mark if I had to guess, and that's like pushing the state record, like flirting with the state record archery buck in Georgia for a typical. The following year, hunted him all season, and I actually was hunting this deer, and it distracted me from Charlie. And I had like some summer pictures of Charlie, and they weren't great pictures, so I couldn't really tell like exactly what he was. I didn't know how big he was. And so I had great pictures of this deer, was hunting this deer like crazy. I named this deer Achilles. We'll tell his story in a minute, but my entire season was focused on him. And then once I killed him in the rut in November, I started getting pictures of Charlie. He started showing back up. And I got my first clear, good pictures of what he was, and he would have annihilated the state record in Georgia, like smashed it by a mile. Just a perfect, clean, mega giant 10-pointer, massive brow tines, massively tall G2s, G3s to match, and G4s to match. This one was a little bit shorter, but probably pushing 190s, and as a net, he was like 180 plus, no doubt. And I think the current record at the time was like 172, 173. So just would have blown the state record out of the water. Hunted him all that year, or the rest of that year, and then he actually got sick, and I still to this day don't really know what it was that made him get sick. But he dropped his rack super early. It was like around Christmas time, which most of our deer drop, March time frame. And so he dropped super early, lost a bunch of weight, was just looking horrible. And a part of me for a while there was like thinking he may not make it to the next season. So I kind of ended my year. Baiting was not legal in Georgia at this time. And so I quit hunting, moved in feeders, and was just trying my best to, give him the best chance possible to kind of recover from that injury. What ended up happening was on that feeder, all these other bucks in the area, when a deer drops his antlers, he's essentially defenseless. And so Charlie would take to the feeder. These other bucks would come in and just get really aggressive and run him off. And so I was constantly having to relocate Charlie on where he went, trying to get him a feeder and get him feed to kind of like, again, give him the best chance possible to recover from his injury. So did that several times, found him in several different places. I had a crazy experience where I got permission at a new place, was going down this hill, and as I was going down, I heard what I thought was fireworks going off in the driveway, and I was like, oh, the kids are setting off fireworks. And it was actually an old pine tree about this big around that was cracking. And I looked up I first looked at the driveway, thinking it was firecrackers, and then I realized this giant tree was like about to fall on top of me, and I ran and literally dove out of the way just in the nick of time as the thing slammed to the ground and dove all the way down to the creek. And so I almost died trying to find him and get him back to health. But he went missing around the March time frame. Didn't know where he was, didn't know if he was still alive. And then after just searching, found him in a kudzu patch, which kudzu in the summertime is, for people that don't know, it's similar to like soybeans. It's a super high protein forage. It's prevalent in Atlanta and really a lot of metro areas. It was originally introduced to help with erosion along roadways. These deer thrive on it, and that was his summertime sanctuary, and that's what made him recover. And so when he grew back, he actually grew weaker. He was 183 this year that I killed him, but he, lost some length on this brow tine, lost some length on this G3, totally lost his G4 here, lost length on kind of everything. So he was still obviously a huge deer, but not what he was. And so that was the story leading up to Drew basically saying, I want to film this story, like this is crazy. And so he picked up a camera, followed me the whole year. I can't tell you how many times it'd be like, the deer would show up. I'd call Drew and be like, dude, can you come meet me? Like, we're gonna go hop in the tree. And he's working a construction job at the time. I was selling life insurance at the time, wearing a suit and tie, and we would both cut out of work just to go hop in a stand to not even see this deer. So there was always the cat and mouse that was going on. And then finally, our paths collided on a November morning. I think what had happened was a lot of these deer had figured out what tree we were in. Again, this is like pretty early on in our hunting careers, making a lot of mistakes, kind of learned that the deer had patterned us, threw a curveball and changed it up on them. And I think it was literally like 1 or 2 sets in. And he came in to our little food plot, hit a scrape. And the rest is history. We put a teaser out for Charlie. And that was kind of what launched Seek One. That was like our first filmed hunt, first crack at trying to tell stories of deer that we're hunting. And it was received well and just kind of sent us down this wild road that we have embarked on now. A lot more details, obviously of that story. You can see them on our channel, but that's some behind the scenes look that I haven't really shared all that much about, especially with the tree falling to me almost dying. But this deer is Thor, and he was 208. So he was my second 200-inch deer from Georgia. And this story actually starts, it's kind of funny. I was entered into there was like a local Georgia bow hunters group. And it was like randomly drawn, like teams of, I think, 4. And the winner got like a $500 gift card to Bass Pro, like each team member. And so how it worked was like, with the scoring system was each point was worth like 10 points. The width was worth a certain amount. And so anyways, this competition was like heavily weighted on a deer that had a bunch of points. Well, throughout the whole summer, I'm looking for what deer I'm going to hunt. And actually, this was the deer that I was going to hunt that year. I had him on camera all summer, was obsessed with this deer. I love just like an old, gnarly, 6, 7 point, just something crazy looking. And this deer's brow tines are wild. So I was obsessed with this deer, but for that bow hunting competition, it was like, he's just a 7-pointer. It's like he would not have scored well in that competition. And so I hunted this deer like crazy. And this deer got hit by a Mercedes-Benz. Some lady, the story with this deer is, and you can kind of see his nose is cracked. I hunted this deer, he disappeared, relocated areas, and he actually was running across a road. Some lady had bought a Mercedes-Benz that day, like literally that morning, drove off the lot with her brand new Mercedes, was driving to her house from buying her car, and this buck ran across the road, collided with the hood of her car, totaled her car, and this deer broke its neck. And I was able to recover this deer and did a Euro mount on him, and pretty special deal. But all my focus was on this deer. And then kind of like late August, I found this deer, Thor. And I remember the first time seeing pictures of him, I was just like, blown away. I'd never seen a non-typical like that before in my life. He's got 24 points. And kind of fast forwarding a little bit here, when I was entering this, or convinced to enter this bow hunting competition with George, it was like a 7-pointer. This guy would have scored like literally no points, almost no points for this competition. I ended up killing a 24-pointer, and I think with that buck alone, it like won the whole entire deal. I didn't even need the other like 3 guys in my team, and there was a lot of people that were not happy with me because it's kind of hard to compete with a buck that has 24 points. But the interesting part about that deer is he was in a spot that like you never would have ever have thought to find a big deer like that, and that's been a lot of one of our ingredients to success is like finding deer in the most overlooked places. These deer are amazing at finding places where they can just be left alone, and a lot of times they fly under the radar. So if you're looking at an aerial map, you never would have ever guessed that this deer was where he was. He had a lot of big acreages that he could go, but he avoided those because that's where a lot of the pressure was, and he tucked into these little nook and crannies. And so I found this deer in a super overlooked place, hung my stand, had everything ready, and I remember opening night, I'm sitting in my stand, and the guy that gave me permission was like super cool. I'm sitting up there, I'm being quiet, and the guy that gave me permission has no concept of hunting clearly whatsoever, because I'm up there hunting and he's in his backyard with his pool, and he's like trying to have a conversation with me. I'm like 80 yards into the woods behind his house, and he's at his pool and he's like struggling to get the top off of his chlorine bucket. He's like, "Yo, Lee," and I'm like, "Hey, what's up?" He's like, "Can you climb down real quick? I need some help." And I'm like, I just got set, I just got my bow hung, like settling in. I'm hunting a 200-inch deer. This guy wants me to climb down and help him with his chlorine bucket to throw tabs in his pool while I'm trying to hunt. And so I'm like, he's gracious enough to let me hunt. I was like, yeah, I can help him with a bucket. So climb down, help him get the lid off the bucket, toss some chlorine tablets. I was like, "Hey, you good?" Because I'm going to go back and try and kill a big deer. It's like, "I'm good, man." Go back in, didn't see anything that night, slipped in the next morning, and this is what was also crazy. The spot that I was getting pictures of this deer was in a place that I only had pictures of one deer in about a month time frame of running a camera in there. I only had one deer ever show up on camera, and it was always him. On the outskirts of this place, I would have all kinds of different deer, some young bucks, does, different things like that. But in this central spot, he was literally the only deer that would come in there. So I knew if I saw any deer coming that it was gonna be him. And I guess it was just his kingdom, his zone. He didn't let any other deer in there. So I got settled in that next morning, and like right at first light, he'd been in there all night. Right at first light, I see legs coming. Didn't even see rack, nothing. I just knew it was him. Immediately stood up, grabbed my bow. Got a great shot on him. He only went about 40 yards, but he fell in the neighbor's yard. Not yard, but the neighbor's property behind their house. And took a minute to get the proper permission from that owner. I was having a hard time getting in touch with him, but got the right permission, recovered the deer. And at the time, that was the biggest deer I'd ever killed, 24 points and 208. So that's the story of Thor. Now, this deer I kind of alluded to, Achilles. Y'all probably know nothing about this deer. He is 177 inches, and he is a clean, typical. It's funny, like I've killed several bucks in Georgia that were really flirting with that state record, typical state record line. I wouldn't say that it's like a goal of mine. I never really set that as like a goal. That really doesn't mean anything to me to have that record, but it's just I've killed several deer that have just really flirted with that record. He was probably the record for 2 years. And then this one was super close to the typical record. And again, it doesn't mean anything, but it's just, cool that some bucks I've killed have kind of ranked in that, class of just like state record type deer. So this deer, the year before, was like a 140. I think he was like 3. And then jumping into 4.5, he blew up. He put on like 40 inches and had him in this place all summer. Was totally fixated on this deer. This was, again, like at the time, I think the biggest deer that I had ever killed was like maybe 140s, maybe 150. So this is like the first 170 that I've ever hunted, like my first big deer. 150 is a really big deer, don't get me wrong, but like 170 class buck. This is the first one ever like that I ever hunted. And so watched him all summer. Opening morning, nothing. Opening evening, he's bedded at this hilltop, and I watch him get up out of his bed, and he's like slowly working down this hill. And it was like probably 20 minutes had elapsed from the time I saw him to the time that he came in front of me. And I've never had a buck get me more shook up than this deer, because watching a deer for that long and him just like slowly taking his time, stopping, analyzing, looking around, just slowly working. I mean, it just like the adrenaline in me just like boiled into a top. So he finally got to me, and he was probably like, I don't know, man, he's 20 yards or less, like pretty steep angle down, and, you know, shot the deer, thought it was a great hit. Deer takes off running. I remember calling Kendall, and I was like, dude, I got him. And so we're all super pumped. And again, this is like really early on in my hunting career, so mistakes are being made. They're all opportunities to have lessons learned. So we start tracking this deer. We're not seeing the blood that we'd like to see. Tracking for a while, you know, nothing. We just keep going. And I'm sure we bumped him at some point. Never found the deer. Well, lo and behold, about maybe a month goes by, and I'm trying to find him, getting new spots, trying to relocate him, just in the chance that he's still alive. And I finally get a picture of him about a month later, and he had probably gone a couple miles, 2-3 miles from where the initial shot was. And I can see in the trail cam picture the exit, like 100% exited from one of his lungs. And I think what happened was it was a steep angle, and I think it just caught the one lung. But you can see a perfect exit, like right in the crease in the pocket of his opposite shoulder. And you can still see my broadhead like poking out of his skin. And I'm sitting there like in amazement of how tough these deer are. I'm like, I don't know how this deer survived that shot, but you know, they're always, they never cease to amaze me how strong they are, how strong-willed they are to live. So I named the deer Achilles because I thought I'd put a good shot on him. And the Achilles story is like, you know, you had to hit, I don't know, some Greek creature or something, and you like had to hit him in the Achilles heel, and that was like the only way you could take him down. So I was like, I thought I hit him good. Apparently I've got to hit him like, you know, in the one, like the money spot to have a chance at him. And so kind of named him Achilles, relocated him to 2 or 3 miles away, and started hunting him again. Place I was at was a really awesome corridor spot, had a ton of traffic from does. Rut time frame, November, a lot of cat and mouse back and forth. He's showing up on a ton of different places. And this is the deer, we've referred to it a couple times, where I had a trail cam picture of him at point A and then at point B in the same night. And point A and point B were 7 miles apart as the crow flies. So this deer, even after that shot in the rut, was traveling a monstrous way. And that's literally in a straight line, A to B, same night, 2 trail cams, pictures of him 7 miles apart, which is just mind-blowing that these deer can cross roads and the terrain that they live in like it's nothing. So cat and mouse game ensues. I'm like, where do I go? Do I go here? Do I go there? He's showing up here or there. And this has happened to me time and time again, where I'm like, I'm going to pick the most central point that I can of where I believe that this deer's range is, and I'm just going to ride it out there. Because the time when I get a picture of him over here and I go hunt there, he's already moved back over here. So I focused in on a central zone and just rode it out there, and I think it was 2-3 sits into that place. First light, I hear some ch-ch-ch behind me, doe's coming through, and then I see Achilles behind her, and it's like literally right cracking light. Buck comes in, following this doe, 20 yards, whacked him, and the rest is history. He went not that far and fell over, and that was the first, you know, really big deer of my life. And I remember that day just vividly. That's the thing about all of these deer, is I remember almost every detail of the stories, because it's just something that has always lived so vividly in my mind. So that's the story of these 3 deer. maybe some of the stuff y'all haven't heard before, maybe some of the stuff you have and you already knew about, but again, I can't land on that these are my favorites. It's hard to choose my favorites, but these are definitely three of some of the ones that